Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Amma ba'd. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to another episode of Sunday the Community with me, Hafiz Muhammad Umar. And in today's show, we are going to be talking about what it's like to be living in Luton and accessing the town from a wheelchair user's perspective. And excuse me, to that effect, I am delighted to be joined by Dawn McKenna. Welcome to the show, Dawn.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us. Dawn is a local resident who has lived almost all of her life in Luton, and Dawn uses a wheelchair, and she is uh, a disability self-advocate at the moment. In essence, what that means is Dawn feels very passionate about accessibility and ensuring people um, of all abilities are able to access all the facilities, shops, services available to them in and around our town. That does include people with disabilities. And we are going to be talking about what that journey is like. And perhaps if you, as a listener, have your thoughts to share, please, by all means, feel free to get in touch with us. This is a pre-recorded show, so please don't ring or text in today, but you can certainly get in touch with us, and we'd love to be able to hear from you and share your thoughts. And alongside this, as you will be aware, some of you, it is also this Down Syndrome Awareness Month, and we will be interviewing some amazing people with Down syndrome, including my brother Raz, who has been on the show on numerous occasions, and as well as other people who live with the condition. And to celebrate that, on the 15th and 16th of November 2025, there is the Down Syndrome British Swimming Championship taking place in Crawley. So if anybody with Down syndrome is interested in taking part in that competition, if you just go to any search engine and type in British Down Syndrome Swimming Championship, uh, all the details will come up and you can register online. And it is an amazing event taking place. Raz is already signed up, and I hope other people from our area will be able to take part too. So, coming back to today, then, go on, tell us a bit about yourself, please. I don't want people to think it's Dawn, a person who is a wheelchair user only, because you're far more than that. Tell us a bit about yourself, maybe your childhood, perhaps, and then we'll talk a bit about the current situation around town.
Okay, well, I'm 44 years old. I grew up in Luton for most of my life. I spent most of that time living as a child in what is known as Tin Town, which is an area of massive deprivation and other issues already. There are a number of problems in that community, and not all can be solved by just throwing money at them. As a young adult, I became aware that my abilities weren't quite the same as other people. And slowly, over about a 10-year period, it got to the point where I required the use of a wheelchair in order to mobilize around. I have had various jobs over the years, often getting fired through no fault of my own. I would get hired, and then it would be some sort of problem, usually to do with me being autistic, often bullying, or other issues. And that was when I could get hired. Unfortunately, discrimination doesn't exactly go away just because you're light skinned and don't look like you're an ethnic minority. In my time when I'm not trying to deal with an incredibly ableist society, I enjoy reading, drawing, and I contribute to a lot of medical research, and I also attend the disability network meetings in order to help improve the town.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Dawn. So if we start with early or education? Did you go to a mainstream or a special school? You don't have to name the school you went to, just to get an idea.
I went to mainstream school.
Okay. And at that time, did you need to use a wheelchair, or did your condition
No,
deteriorate later in life?
I was already suffering problems as a child. The
Hmm.
condition I have, Ehlers-Danlos, which is, while it's not, it's considered rare because it's rarely diagnosed, but it's a connective tissue disorder. But it typically starts manifesting in childhood, usually as unexplained leg pain that's often dismissed as the child having growing pains, even when it goes on or starts long before the time frame which you would expect to find growing pains. But despite the fact that I had all the signs of autism and I was suffering from pain and other issues, because I also have another rare condition that causes blackouts, but I wasn't sent to a special school. I,
Yeah. No, thank you so much. I was just trying to get sort of like an idea of what kind of access you might have had as a child near a school. So if you want me to use at the time, what sort of age were you at when you realized, you know what, using a wheelchair might be more helpful to me for my own independency than trying to walk around?
um, that would be probably around 25, 26.
Thank you.
That was when it really started getting bad.
Um, and how did you find that transition from being able to walk around to realizing actually, you know what, for my own needs, I now need to use a wheelchair?
Honestly, not as bad as you would think. A lot of people who are able-bodied immediately respond to the idea of having to use a wheelchair with horror. They're like, "Oh, I'd rather be dead than be in a wheelchair." I'm like, "Well, thank you for saying my life's not worth living." But once you're in that position where having to get a wheelchair, what you find is it goes from you having to struggle to suddenly being able to do a lot more stuff simply because you have the support you need. And people just don't seem to actually understand that it is actually freeing, that you no longer have to worry about, oh, am I going to get halfway down the road and fall over? Am I going to get there and have to call a taxi back because I can't walk any further?
Mm. Um, and I think that's one of the, I guess, worries people have, and they think being in a wheelchair might mean losing my independency um, or ability to walk completely. Actually, as you put it, if you are able to start accessing the early help, that could perhaps give you a better experience in life. I'm thinking of some of my cricket friends who, through no fault of their own, either through an injury or an illness, ended up using a wheelchair, but that has not stopped them from playing cricket, for example. One in particular, he went on to play at a very high standard. In fact, he represented the England disability team, um, and he could stand up, but he couldn't move much because of his the severity of the pain in his back. But he would otherwise be on his wheelchair. So when he was batting, he would stand up from his sitting position, and he could not run, and he could only stand for a few seconds, but enough to be able to still experience batting as most able-bodied batsmen did. So I guess what that does is that still gives you more opportunities to be able to live life as independently as possible. Let's switch over to accessing the town then, please. How I know there's this big thing about making Luton an accessible town from every perspective, and the local authorities trying to do a lot of work around that. The way things are at the moment, how accessible do you think Luton is?
I think Luton has some serious access problems, and these boil down to a mix of infrastructure, inconsideration on the part of other people, and just nobody really stopping to think, is this going to cause a problem for somebody who maybe isn't as mobile as I am? I wouldn't
Mm,
say that most of it's malicious, but I would say that most of it is thoughtless, and it can feel quite depressing when you're dealing with it because it's like all I want to do is a simple task, and I can't even do that because somebody didn't stop to think before they did something. To give one just one example, I went in a shop. Now this was quite a few years back. They haven't repeated this, thank God. I went in a shop. I went to go to the tills, and they had like those bollards with the straps between them. Some bright spark had decided that since it was Christmas time, they were going to put an enormous Christmas tree right next to the entrance of that little queue space, and it had been narrowed down to the point where most walking adults would barely be able to squeeze by. My wheelchair certainly wasn't going to manage that, so I couldn't even take an item up to the front and pay for it because of just one thoughtless decision.
Mm, mm. And I think you were sharing that with us, and I guess that is quite a powerful term to think about people being thoughtless, and that might have been, somebody arranging the shop in a particular manner around probably the busiest time of the year, but then on daily basis, moving around town, thoughtless, I guess, can also come about. Drivers parking inconsiderably. It's probably one of the main challenges I witness around the town. Um, and also how accessible particular places are, whether it's businesses or services. Um, if you think about your experience of town, what would you say are the most accessible and disability friendly places before we talk about those that perhaps need improving?
Um, the town hall's pretty good. Town hall's
Hmm.
pretty good. If you've got going there for something, it's usually pretty easy to maneuver, unless you
Hmm.
need to go down to a specialist part of it.
Hmm.
The mall itself can be quite good. Individual shops, it can vary. Some of the shops but like to crowd their aisles with extra products and displays to the point where it's difficult to move around if you've got a wheelchair or if you, say, got a buggy. But for the most part, once you're in the town centre, it's actually pretty easy to get around, with the possible exception of the lifts being out
Hmm.
or and people being inconsiderate or the decisions made by individual shops. The problem is getting into the town. And obviously, you mentioned bad parking, but there's also the fact that we have a lot of pavement parkers and we have a lot of people who leave their bins out. With the pavement parkers, what they'll do a lot of time is they'll damage the pavement because it's not really built to have a very large car on top of it, and it cracks the pavement, and that actually is a bit of a problem when you're in a wheelchair trying to get past all this damaged pavement, and it creates a trip hazard for pedestrians who have things like vision loss, or or if you've got like a buggy, you don't want to suddenly be pitched over your buggy because you've hit a massive divot in the street. And then there's, of course, the ones that park so far onto the pavement that you're forced off onto the road, and it's difficult enough if you've got a buggy, but with a wheelchair, there's no way I can't get up and down. That's before you cutting up, talk about all the curb cuts that aren't actually there or that don't work. There's one round the corner from me. It's thankfully gone now. It went down about an inch and then went straight back up. It was still about 6 inches off the road surface. I'm like, well, no one's going to get down that. But as a pavement parking, the buses can be a nightmare because people often will not move from the one wheelchair spot that I can sit in. Even I had one incident in which I went to the bus to catch a bus. A lady came up with a buggy, and there was already a buggy on the bus, and she saw me, and she actually rammed me into the side of the bus to push past me to get on first, so she didn't have to collapse the buggy. And I'm like, you could have just asked. There was no reason for her to just shove me into the side of this bus.
Hmm.
But that is the biggest problem, getting into the town centre.
Hmm. And what about, I mean, you mentioned from public transport to the buses there, um, using our train station. We got three in the town. We got Lee Grave, we got Luton Central, we have Luton Airport Parkway. or any of those that are more accessible than the other two, or what they like?
Parkway is the best for
Mm-hmm.
access, and that's not saying much.
Mm.
Luton Town Centre is completely, absolutely. There's only one platform that is level access, and that doesn't carry the vast majority of the trains. I've never been to Leagrave, but I hear there's all kinds of access problems with it, and they're trying to get step-free access for it. With Parkway, I have travelled from it once, and that was a bit of a nightmare. We got there, turned up, me and my wheelchair. We got on the train. That went all fine. And then there was, and despite the fact they called ahead to let somebody know which stop I was getting off at, there was nobody on the platform waiting for us to get me off. And then on the way back, the lifts at Parkway had completely broken down.
Oh my gosh.
So in a way, it's good. It's good that I can at least walk somewhat because we just folded my wheelchair and took it down the escalators. But if I'd been in my big wheelchair, there's no way I'd been stuck at Parkway. I wouldn't be able to get off the platform.
I'm sorry to hear that. And what about the airport itself? Have you ever had the opportunity to fly from London Luton Airport at all?
I have not flown from Luton Airport, but I've heard the complaints.
Okay. Okay. I think these are the sort of things that, as you mentioned earlier, the disability network meetings are so strong in making sure we, as the local residents of Luton, have a say in what goes on and try and bring about changes. And we are also quite lucky that both of our local MPs are very passionate about disability and making sure the town gets as much support as possible to try and make it more accessible. Um,
I'll be
and
honest with you, that's not my experience with the MPs.
he hasn't been.
It
Um,
hasn't been my experience with the MP.
okay. And thank you for sharing that with us. I know they are both always very, very um, vocal and very much wanting to put things right. And as is the case with the local councillors, listeners, if you're out there and you're thinking, I have an accessibility issue, please, please, please do not feel isolated. Do what Dawn has done and come out and share your story. If you need to contact the local councillors or the local MPs, please do so. And if you feel that um, if something hasn't been done about it, again, there are lots of other ways of having your voice heard. And disability network meetings are one way, but there are so many other ways of getting involved. And one of those is through your local leisure centres or the local community centres. How accessible do you find them, Dawn? The community centres
They're
or the
pretty
leisure
good.
centres?
I've been to Inspire because I took a special class there for people with my kind of disabilities and with difficulties, and that was quite good. The lift's a bit small. It could have been better planned, but at least it works. The accessible changing room, from what I understand, is quite nice. I've not actually been in there as of yet. They have proper lifts going down into the pool for wheelchair users, so you can be lowered straight into the pool without needing to climb down the railings. So, generally speaking, Inspire is fairly accessible. I can't speak to other places
Mm.
because I've not been there. The private ones can be a bit of a problem. I had an issue because obviously I have carers with me, and they also had a package, but they kept cancelling my carers package, and then they would refuse me access because you don't have a carer with you. Another one took my money and was like, "Oh, by the way, we're not going to let you exercise because you're disabled," which was pleasant.
I think these are the sort of precise areas that we really, really want to make sure we provide feedback on. I hope you did make that clear to somebody with authority because that is clear discrimination, and we want to make sure that people understand that regardless of a person's disability, they have the right to be able to access the service they are providing, and they should not be denied that opportunity. Um, and then accessing the community. Let's talk a little bit about places or shops in and around Berry Park, for example. Um, well, firstly, have you had the opportunity to go into Berry Park recently on your wheelchair at all?
I don't very often go to Bury Park now with my
Hmm.
wheelchair,
Hmm.
simply because it is a nightmare to navigate.
Okay. Would you say that's one of the main reasons that you stopped going to Berry Park for
Yeah, it
shopping
is one of the
purposes?
main reasons.
Okay. Um, and from your experience then, what sort of things do you think wheelchairs might encounter as problems, and what could be done to make it more accessible?
I think the problem is I wouldn't say it's necessarily e- malicious, but the problem is when Bury Park was developing, because obviously you've got a lot of shops there. It's probably got nearly as many as the mall or point or whatever they're calling it this week has. And there doesn't seem to really be an understanding of just how much parking is necessary for that kind of a shopping centre. It's almost like a second mall within Luton, but it's not accorded the same respect as Luton Point is. You know, Luton Point has at least three big car parks serving it. Actually, no, four, and a scatter of smaller ones. Bury Park, I don't think there's a single car park in it. And so, if you go out there in a vehicle, you've got to hope that there's some parking.
Mhm.
And then, of course, you get into the shops, which, you know, in some cases, it's not the shopkeeper's fault because the shop was built with a step into it originally, so it's just not accessible. And it's going to be expensive to somehow deal with that when you've got it opening straight onto the street. But in other cases, you've got people who they put all their wares out in the street, and again, like some of the shops in the town centre, they crowd their aisles, so it's just enough space for an able-bodied person to fit through. But anybody who's using a wheelchair, anybody who's got a buggy, they've got no hope.
Um, and but I think first of all, thank you so much for sharing that experience with us, Dawn. And you're right, there are a number of shops that might have a ramp leading into them, but getting to the ramp could in itself be a challenge because of the obstacles you have to get around before getting that far. And massive shout out to the shops who have made the effort to keep their shops accessible with not just a wheel ramp at the front, but also making sure the area around is very, very clear. We have got the community centre, Berry Park Community Centre, around the centre there, which thankfully is accessible. But again, I think getting
Yeah,
that far because this is right in the centre, we just want to make sure that that's clear. And the listeners, if you are listening to this and thinking, you know what, I run a business in Berry Park, I'd like you to think a little bit about what's happening outside your doorstep, please. If each individual business took ownership of ensuring the area around their shop is accessible, before you know it, we won't have this issue that Don and I are talking about. But the fact that everybody will be able to get through more safely, and safety is a significant paramount, and we've got to make sure everybody, including the wheelchair users, are safe around there. And then, of course, further up, we've got the good old Luton Town Football Club. Have you ever had the opportunity to visit there at all at Calmouth Road, Dawn?
no, I'm not really
Not
a
been to the
football
games?
fan.
Oh, Dawn. It's absolutely fine. And I know Luton Town Football Club have been, trying to be as accessible as possible. There is a Luton Town Football Club disabled supporters network out there as well. We do lots of amazing things to make sure all fans, including those with disabilities, are able to access our good old Kenny whilst we still have it. If the players were playing as well as the fans are trying to accommodate everybody. I'm sure we'll still be playing a much higher level rather, but that's a separate story altogether. And then finally, in your own leisurely activities, you mentioned reading as one. What about the libraries in and around town?
The
How accessible are
library
they?
in the town centre is pretty good.
Hmm.
It's usually pretty good and easily navigated.
Hmm. And have you been to any other libraries around the town at all?
I don't think I've been to any of the other libraries around town.
Okay. I think some community centres have them. Yeah, and Park Being one Children Community Centre, you tell us more by library visiting there. I think there was League of Library, which I'm not sure whether it still runs or not. But again, yeah, I think the key thing is if you have a particular hobby, listeners, and you want to be able to follow that through, please do not let a disability or a medical condition stop that. Disability is a protected characteristic. By law, you have every right to be able to access what you want to be doing. We are coming to the end of this half of the show. My guest today has been Dawn McKenna. Dawn is a local self advocate for disability and a great champion for raising not just awareness, but also doing things for the betterment of the local disabled community. Dawn, thank you so much for your time.
Okay, thanks for having
It's,
me.
it's been an absolute pleasure having you with us.